The economic implications of the pandemic situation might result in the collapse of the meat and dairy industries, or at the very least, big changes are coming down the pipe. You need to see what I'm about to show you to understand how this situation is affecting these industries. Before we get into it, guys, the first thing you need to understand is that concentrated animal feeding operations are able to operate because of what's called an economy of scale. You can't dial production back 50 or 75% and still expect to maintain the same cost structure and efficiencies when you're talking about an economy of scale. That's not how it works. So without anything further being said, let's go ahead and show you guys some of the impact that this pandemic situation is having on the meat and dairy industries. Okay, to start off with, dairy farmers in the UK are already dumping 5 million liters of milk per week, and the wholesale price there has dropped 25% in a single week. UK dairy farmers are already asking for a government bailout, and next, we are looking at Canada with a very similar situation where 500 farms in Ontario have been asked to dump 5 million liters of milk per week. Ontario being one of the major producing regions, but we also see this stretching into Newfoundland and Labrador, where they're dumping 170,000 liters of milk last week alone. Bringing this home to America, we can see this report out of Pittsburgh, where massive amounts of dairy are being dumped in part due to the closures of schools and restaurants.
They are continuing to work, and they are continuing to do so. However, the coronavirus has affected many in the industry where they are actually dumping all of their milk.
I mean, in our business, you have expenses like any other business, and then you don't have any income. It's only going to be a couple months till you can't function anymore.
This is probably the most alarming story right here, where farmers in America are panic buying feed to keep 95 million cows fed. The article says keeping America's 95 million cows, 77 million pigs, and 9 billion with a B chickens fed isn't as simple as it might seem. Many of the feed mills that supply these farms are empty and could face closures as employees get sick. Additionally, slaughterhouses could slow production, forcing them to keep their animals alive longer. This gets into the demand for gasoline going down and therefore ethanol production being lower, and byproducts of which are used for animal feed becoming unavailable. So these farmers are purchasing 3 weeks of rations all at once instead of getting multiple deliveries per day as needed. This next story shows us how chicken wings sales are normally spiked during the Super Bowl and March Madness, but not this year. Chicken wing prices have gotten cut in half, and sales have slumped significantly in the absence of the NCAA basketball tournament. All right, now before all the vegans out there start celebrating this chaos, let's talk for a second about the implications for the animals in the short term, and then in a moment we'll focus on the more medium to long-term implications for these industries and the economy. When we're talking about facing supply chain disruptions that affect the animal agriculture industry, you saw in the article how many of these animals could be facing slaughter or starvation. There's other aspects to it, and I'm not an expert in animal husbandry, but there's pharmacological necessities and things beyond food that these animals need to be produced at this kind of scale. Keyword being scale. We're not talking about one guy who lives out in the country, he's got 2 goats and a cow. This is not the situation. In fact, if we start looking at the medium to long-term implications here, I think in the medium term we will see people getting and sourcing their animal products from local producers. But when it comes to the right now situation, really the question starts to be, if there are supply chain disruptions, will they try to continue to maintain these elevated levels of production that are designed for the economy of scale during good times? And the only way I could see that happening is if there's some sort of massive government bailout that benefits animal agriculture, meat and dairy producers, which I think there is going to be one way or another. I can't predict or account for that and what that's going to mean, but I'm just going to put that on the table as a likelihood in this case. Now, when we talk about what that would look like, because that gets into the whole thing of will there be bankruptcies, which industries are going to fail. In my opinion, as long as there is demand for these products, then someone or some group of investors is going to step in and purchase the assets and then put them into use for the production to make the supply to meet that demand. You know, the way that vegans talk about shutting down farms and the changing into a more vegan economy, every time I've heard someone bring that up, they always talk about it in the context of demand gradually going down, and this is not the circumstance in this situation. We're seeing just rapid decline in changing circumstances, and these industries were not made for that, and they can't adapt to that very well. That's why they're dumping milk, and prices are coming down on things like chicken wings where they overproduced in anticipation of events like the Super Bowl and March Madness. It's crazy. All right, so I can't say for sure that this is going to lead to the collapse of the meat and dairy industries. In fact, I don't think it will. I think people are going to source these products locally if they aren't available from larger scale producers. Whether or not this will affect demand in a way where people are thinking more about their health and leaning more into plant-based foods, I can't say for sure. I cannot say for sure. But what I can say, guys, is that in times of uncertainty and emergency, really the best thing you can do is try to maintain your lifestyle as best as possible. So you don't want to have to fall back to eating like canned chili and stuff, like junk food especially. We see a lot of people filling their carts up with unhealthy food at the grocery stores. And I think, I have been reluctant to share with you guys ideas for preparing for a crisis. It's not exactly my area of expertise. But if that's something you guys would be interested in me discussing, then let me know in the comment section down below. And as a vegan, what I think you could do to prepare. And even now, where things are a little bit dicey, but the availability of goods and services is limited, but still out there, I do have some ideas, and I'd be willing to share that with you guys if you want to know. But again, I'm not trying to scare anybody, and I don't know how long this will last. So I've been reluctant to kind of touch on that because I think good times could be back around the corner with from an economic perspective, but I don't know. I honestly don't know. So we'll see. Are you currently eating meat and dairy products? And if so, where do you get them? Where do you source them? How would that change if where you source your products no longer was able to service your needs? That's a good question. Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll catch you guys on the next video. All right, y'all know what time it is. Red Pill Vegan. Next.